योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचाम् मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुर्गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम्. So in the previous session, we looked at Sutra 3.33. That is the one that we saw last. And that was Pratibham. And we had a discussion on what that means as well as the bhashya on that. So the term that came about there was Pratibham. And Pratibham was defined as Tad Vivekajasya Jnanasya Purva Rupam. So it was described as the dawn before the sunrise, where the sunrise is the rise of the Vivekaja Jnanam. Jnanam arising from Viveka. Jnanam born out of Viveka. The Viveka Khyati, Prasankyanam, etc. we have seen in earlier sessions. And it is essentially being able to discriminate between the Purusha and the Chitta, even the purest form of the Chitta, where the Buddhi Sattva. And being able to discriminate that was Viveka Jnanam. And the dawn before that arises, that Jnanam was known as Pratibham. Now, in that context, when we talk about Vivekaja Jnanam, which is about discriminating between the Chitta, even in its purest form, Malarahita, Shuddha Chitta, even in its purest form, and the Purusha. In that context, one has to then understand what the Chitta is, and then what the Purusha is, and then be able to discriminate that. So that is sort of what is known as the Sangati. Sangati means how does one harmoniously follow from the other? And therefore, having understood that Sangati as to how the next sutra comes about, we go to the next sutra, which is 3.34, and it specifies a certain Sanyama, which is the 16th in the series so far. So Sutra 3.34 says, hṛdaye cittasaṃvit, which means when the Sanyama happens on the hṛdaya is the heart region, roughly speaking, the heart region, chest region, which has a lot of significance in Adhyatma, both in Upanishads and Vedanta, as well as various yoga Upanishads and so on. So when Sanyama, which is the trio of Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, happens in that region, one gets the samvit, which is complete knowledge, correct knowledge of the Chitta. So this is the channel to have sakshatkara, a complete understanding of the Chitta. So that is hṛdaye cittasaṃvit. So to understand the context that I just described from the previous to here, there is a nice line that describes that says Sanyamasya avantara siddhayaha uktaha. So all the various siddhis coming from Sanyama, ending even with Pratibhadva Sarmam, which says that when you get the Pratibham, the dawn before the Vivekaja Jnanam, all the Sanyamas, all the siddhis described so far and that exist will come automatically. That is what the previous sutra said. So that is Sanyamasya avantara siddhayaha uktaha. So for this, idanim, now, sattva-purusha anyata khyati rupam mukhyam siddhim vivakshuhu adau tatsanyama hetubhuta yaha chitta samvidah karanamaha. Okay, so this is not part of the Vyasa Bhashya, but one of the other texts elaborates. Because all the various sanyamas and their siddhis have been described. Now, which is the main siddhi? Sattva Purusha Anyata Khyati Rupam Mukhyam Siddhim Vivakshuhu. Meaning, the main siddhi, which is Viveka Khyati. What is its nature? Sattva Purusha Anyata Khyati. So the Chitta Sattva or the Buddhi Sattva and the Purusha, their difference, the discrimination between them, which we have talked about a little bit earlier. Because when the Chitta is completely pure, it in some sense will quote unquote reflect the Purusha. So it appears to be the same, but it is entirely different. So the understanding the difference of that is a very, almost the highest form of jnanam. So that is the Mukhya Siddhi. Now Mukhyam Siddhim Vivakshuhu, with a desire to start explaining that. Adau, before that. Tat Sanyam Hetu Bhuta Yaha. For that, the understanding of the cittasaṃvit. Tat Sanyama Hetu Bhuta Yaha cittasaṃvidah karanamaha. So firstly we have to understand the chitta, and to obtain the cittasaṃvit, what is the sanyama? That is the sanyama on the hṛdaye. And that is the significance of this sutra when it is coming here at this point. And therefore hṛdaye cittasaṃvit. Now, like I said, the hṛdaye desha, the Paramatma, the Antaryami is also said to reside there. So in various texts, in various ways, there is a huge significance of this region. So the highest divinity or the Parabrahman as an inner controller, Antaryami, in each and every being, it is said to reside in the heart region. Bhagavad Gita also has said that Sarvasyaham hṛdisannivishto, I am in the heart of all. So now, what is the siddhi? It is the understanding of the chitta in the sense of the constitution of the chitta and the nature of the chitta, the karmashayas, the vasanas and everything. So here Vyasa says, Yat idam asmin brahmapure daharam pundarikam veshma tatra vijnanam tasmin sanyamat cittasaṃvit. So this line is from the Chandogya Upanishad, which is a highly regarded Upanishad in with the highest number of references in the Brahma Sutras are to that Upanishad, etc. And there is something called the Dahara Vidya, where this notion of Dahara Akasha, the pure Akasha in the heart region, in which there is the Paramatma is able to reside. So, Yad idam asmin brahmapure daharam pundarikam veshma. It is like a region or a room, which is like a lotus, right? House for lotus. There is the Vijnanam. So Vijnanam is sort of the ashraya for knowledge. Now, which in different schools, someone may say this is the buddhi, this is the buddhi sattva, this is the chitta, sometimes it is said this is the jivatma. But the word used here is Vijnanam. Tasmin sanyamat. When sanyama is done there, then cittasaṃvit, the complete sakshatkara, complete understanding of the chitta with its vasanas, karmashayas, which includes manas, buddhi, ahankar, all aspects of the chitta, uha, poha, smriti, all of that, there is a direct realization by the yogi of his own chitta. Okay. So the other related thing is this is also said to be the region for what is known as the Anahata Chakra. So this is the region, the hṛdaye is of high significance. The second aspect to say was that to sort of convey was how this sutra fits in this position, and how the Sutrakara Patanjali at this point he has a vivaksha, he has a desire to explain the Viveka Khyati, and before this the Pratibham was a dawn before Viveka Khyati, and now the Viveka Sanyama for Viveka Khyati is being mentioned. The other aspect is the wonderful reference to the Chandogya Upanishad by Vyasa in this place. So even though the sutra is very short, the bhashya is also very short. There is a lot of significance that one has to understand. Even Guruji, you would have heard several times he used to talk about the head and the heart. And he used to refer to head to refer to rational thought, reasoning, etc. And heart was sort of the divine spark, the intuition. So that same heart is the hṛdaye desha, and here it says hṛdaye cittasaṃvit. So that's 3.34.
So hṛdaye cittasaṃvit. It is quite apparent that chitta is one of the most important concepts of yoga, concept in yoga. It has a lot of significance. Chitta has a lot of significance. And cittasaṃvit is sensing the chitta, discerning the chitta, feeling the chitta, sighting the chitta, knowing the citta. So that cittasaṃvit takes place in heart. So the hṛdayam also gains a lot of importance in yogic processes. It is an important location in yogic processes, and heart figuratively is said to be having that significance. If something is heart of something, then we know how it is important thing. So hṛdayam literally also means something very important, significant location in the human embodiment. So hṛdayam is the heart region. And as you heard, that is a very brief commentary, and the brief comment is almost quoting Chandogya Upanishad, where it is said to be Dhara Akasha. You heard Dharam, Akasha in its purest form, and it's also lotus. It's also in mysticism described as lotus, Pundarikam. And the samyama there on the heart region would give revelation, realization of the very chitta. And this realization of chitta is so important, as you just now heard, for that highest discrimination, which is said to be sattvapuruṣayoratyantāsaṃkīrṇayoḥ or viveka khyati. So that vivekam pertains to the two entities of Purusha and Sattva, which have locus in the heart, and therefore the heart gains that importance. Therefore, yoga's technology speaks about hṛdaye chakram, anahata chakra, hṛdaye chakra. Hṛdaye also is an important nadi junction, which Upanishads explain that 101 nadis emanate from hṛdayam. Out of 101, 100 have branches, one doesn't have branch, and the 100 have 72,000 branches each. So it's a complex of human psyche consciousness. And the hṛdaya samyama on this heart is not coronary heart, it is the mysterious heart, but in the region of coronary heart. And that is for cittasaṃvit. And cittasaṃvit, as you heard just now, is so important for the supreme siddhi in yoga in the form of viveka jnanam, viveka khyati, sattvapuruṣayoratyantāsaṃkīrṇayoḥ, etc. And that's why heart gains importance in all yogic processes, particularly meditative processes, dharana, dhyan, samadhi. They take place in heart. And that's why this sutra has almost a crown position in processes of yoga. So that is hṛdaye cittasaṃvit. Okay.
Okay. So now we move to the next sutra, 3.35, which now sort of talks about the sattvapuruṣayoratyantāsaṃkīrṇayoḥ mentioned earlier. And this is also specific Sayyama. So it says, 3.35, sattvapuruṣayoḥ atyanta asaṃkīrṇayoḥ pratyayāviśeṣo bhogaḥ parārthatvātsvārthasaṃyamātpuruṣajñānam. So this is a longer sutra, so we have to understand it carefully. So the previous sutra we have learnt about how the siddhi involving the complete understanding of chitta happens. So with that context, so starting from Pratibham to the understanding of chitta, now we come to sattvapuruṣayoḥ atyanta asaṃkīrṇayoḥ pratyayāviśeṣo bhogaḥ parārthatvāt. So the sattva, which refers to the chitta or the buddhi in its purest form. Now why the purest form? Why the rajatama mala has been kept aside? Because that is also active in most cases. Because it is sort of well known, obvious, etc., that chitta, when it has its impurities and the worldly nature with rajatama, etc., it is surely different from Purusha. There is no doubt about that. And that is why the Sutrakara and the Bhashya also refers to only that state of the chitta which is completely pure, so that only the reflection of the Purusha is there. And even that reflection, it's not what, that is a word that is used, and we have discussed that in the first chapter, what that refers to. But even in its pure form, the sattva and the Purusha, which is the purest chitta, and the Purusha are atyanta, okay, that is, as it says, completely asaṃkīrṇam, so completely separate, different, of a different nature. There should be absolutely no mixing or confusion. So that is their nature. So sattvapuruṣayoḥ atyanta asaṃkīrṇayoḥ. So what about them? Pratyayāviśeṣo bhogaḥ parārthatvāt. So the pratyayāviśeṣa, which means pratyaya here refers to the cognitive imprint, or so to speak, the jnanam. The jnanam which emerges by the form, state and form and the imprint of the chitta, and its what is known as the paurusheya jnanam, the touch of the Purusha, the consciousness, that leads to jnanam or pratyaya. Now, if there is no difference, aviśeṣa means similarity, it is the same, then that is bhoga. So, in other words, whatever the chitta presents, that the Purusha reflects or echoes or accepts, and that is the jnanam or the pratyaya. And that is known as bhoga. Bhoga means the enjoyment, suffering, etc. of experiences. Parārthatvāt, because all of this is happening for the Purusha. So it is happening by the chitta for the Purusha, and this is the bhoga. So the sutra is trying to say that even though these two entities are entirely different and there should really be no mixing, however, the jnanam is such that they get mixed up. If you remember the sutra in the first chapter, it says vritti sarupyam itaratra. So whenever there is a vritti, the Purusha sort of accepts that, and we have seen that as Paurusheya Bodha, understanding that emerges through the sort of the involvement of the Chitta and the Purusha. So the Jnanam is a combination of these both coming together, and there is no difference. So that is a single Jnanam that emerges, and that is bhoga, enjoyment or suffering of worldly things, or enjoyment and suffering of whatever the Chitta, whatever imprint is there on the Chitta. Again, if you remember, there was the quotation of the Panchashikacharya that we had discussed earlier, where it had said, Ekameva darshanam, khyatireva darshanam. So both Chitta and the Purusha, they have one Jnanam that emerges, and which is the khyati. Whatever imprint is on the Chitta, that is the combined Jnanam of the Chitta and the Purusha. And that state of vritti sarupyam itaratra, that state is bhoga, and it is known as bhoga, and it is referred to as bhoga because it is also parārtha, because there is activity happening in the Chitta for the purpose of the Purusha, and these experiences are referred to as bhoga, of the nature of enjoyment, suffering, etc. So that is sattvapuruṣayoratyantāsaṃkīrṇayoḥ pratyayāviśeṣo bhogaḥ parārthatvātsvārthasaṃyamātpuruṣajñānam. Okay, now the sutra continues. It says, sattvapuruṣayoratyantāsaṃkīrṇayoḥ. So if it is not that, if there is a svartha sanyama, so this is different from the jnanam of the nature of the bhoga. This is the svartha, which means it is the pratyaya or the jnanam purely of the nature of the Purusha's imprint. And on that, if the sanyama is done, there is jnanam on the Purusha. So here we have to be careful, and the different commentary and further Vachaspati Mishra and say in the Rajamartanda Vritti, etc., there is more elaboration of this. What does Swartha Sanyama mean? Swartha Sanyama does not mean the Sanyama on the Purusha itself, because that is impossible. Like the Taittiriya Upanishad says, Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. So, Chitta, Purusha, Buddhi, Manas, etc. Chitta, Buddhi, Ahankara, Manas, etc. cannot reach the Purusha. So then what is the Swartha Sanyama? Swartha Sanyama is the Sanyama on the imprint of the Purusha. As we have seen, the Purusha lends the consciousness onto the Chitta. And we had even discussed, there was in the very first chapter, the single reflection theory and the double reflection theory and so on. But there is a sort of a bimba, there is an imprint on the Chitta from the Purusha which lends sentience, lends consciousness to the Chitta. Now that part, unsullied by any other perception by the Chitta, purely that part, which is the quote-unquote imprint of the Purusha on the Chitta, if that is the one on whom Sanyama happens, then the Siddhi is Purusha Jnanam. So, how does Purusha Jnanam emerge? The Sanyama by the Chitta happens on that aspect of the Chitta on which the pure touch of the Purusha has arisen, and purely on that, where the other vrittis are not in play. So the vritti sarupyam itaratra question doesn't happen. There is no bhoga, there is no pratyayāviśeṣo situation. In that situation, that pure imprint of the Purusha on the Chitta, if that is made the topic of the Sanyama, or if Sanyama happens on that, then the Siddhi that appears based on that or due to that, that is Purusha Jnanam. That is what the sutra says. Now all these sutras in this chapter, many of them, it says, if Sanyama on so and so, this is the Siddhi. So here we have discussed what the Sanyama is on, but because it is slightly involved, the sutra takes the pain to make it clear. But the Siddhi is extremely of a high stature, because it is, that's Swartha Sanyamat, it says, Swartha means for oneself, Purusha for itself. So the imprint of the Purusha on the Chitta for the process of Paurusheya Bodha, for the nature of consciousness and sentience, that imprint is by the Purusha for itself. So that is why it is referred to as Swartha, for itself, as opposed to Parārtha, whereas all the other forms taken by the Chitta are not, it is taken by the Chitta but not for itself, taken by the Chitta for the Purusha. So that is Parārtha, for something else. Whereas the imprint by the Chitta, by the Purusha on the Chitta, that is by the Purusha for the Purusha. So that the term used is Swartha. So Svarthasaṃyamat, it says Puruṣajñānam. So this is Sutra 3.35. Okay.
So, sattvapuruṣayoratyantāsaṃkīrṇayoḥ, atyanta asankirnayoḥ. You just have heard that sattva and purusha. Naturally, it is also metaphysically referred as purusha and prakriti. These are absolutely distinct. And therefore, a question comes to a layman or inquisitive student, raw student, that if the Prakriti and Purusha, the sentient and insentient are the characteristics, then what is the difficulty in discriminating? It is like discriminating between black and white or light and darkness. So Prakriti Purusha have that distinction which is like dark, black and white or dark and bright. But Sattva Purushayoḥ, Atyanta Asankirnayoḥ, the Sattva, the Buddhi Sattva or the pure, pristine state of Chitta is as transparent as Purusha Tattva. And therefore, although it is totally different, completely different, absolutely different, which is by the word here in the Sutra, asankirnayoḥ, yet it becomes important and difficult to discriminate between them. So one is because one is Purusha and the other one is virtually a Purusha, which you heard in the first chapter, Vritti-Sārupyam Sutra, the example, the metaphor used there of iron particles and lodestone or fire and iron ball. So iron ball in fire becomes fireball. So similarly, the Sattva, Buddhi Sattva, is not easy to discriminate with Purusha, because it is ditto emulation of Purusha Tattva. When Purusha casts a reflection on it, then it becomes seemingly a conscious principle. That's why it is called bhasamana chaitanyam. And therefore, the distinction or viveka between the chaitanyam and bhasamana chaitanyam is not as easy as distinction between black and white and dark and bright. So, sattvapuruṣayoḥ, atyanta asankirnayoḥ. Then, pratyayāviśeṣo. Pratyayāviśeṣo. So, we again understood this in Vritti-Sārupyam Sutra, and which Srineet just now referred to, that there is aviśeṣatvam, not something that you can easily distinguish. For example, when your mind is sad, you never say that my mind is sad but I am not sad, or my mind is happy but I am not happy. So there is that aviśeṣatvam by way of Vritti-Sārupyam. So when there is a Vritti-Sārupyam, we know it is a bhoga. And this Vritti-Sārupya is because of indistinction. That's why we say, my mind is sad, therefore I am sad. My mind is happy, therefore I am happy. My mind is elated, therefore I am elated, or I am elated and my mind is therefore elated. So both have identical state, which is described in Vritti-Sārupyam Itaratra Sutra, which was discussed in the first chapter. And that is called bhogaḥ, that is called mundanity, that is called worldliness, where you are either in whatever degree of delight or whatever degree of sorrow or whatever the degree of happiness or whatever delight of sadness. And that is what the life is made up of. Experience of the nature of some sense, which is from extremely happy to extremely sad. And within that, everything is bhoga. That is mundanity. That is worldliness. This worldliness is because of the parārthatvāt, because the buddhi is meant for Purusha. It is not Purusha meant for buddhi, but buddhi meant for Purusha. It is Prakriti meant for Purusha and not Purusha meant for Prakriti. So that is why there is parārthatvām. It is for someone else. And who is that someone else? What is that someone else? It is Purusha. So when the buddhi or chitta is working for Purusha as someone else, then that is the bhoga. So all manifestations of Prakriti are called parārthatvām, having parārthatvām, or they are called parārtha. They are parārtha. They are meant for para. They are meant for superior. They are meant for another one. They are meant for other one. And that other one is Purusha. Now therein the samyama is in the swartha. And you just now heard Srineet quoting Taittiriya Upanishad that Atma cannot be realized. The Purusha Tattva cannot be realized by any external or internal sense or grosser to very subtler sense. Yato vacho nivartante apraptya manasa saha, which comes as a opening statement for Vijnanamaya Kosha and Anandamaya Kosha, which are the zones of spiritual entities, metaphysically spiritual entities. And therefore, the object or locus of samyama is swartha. It is swarthas. What is that swartha? Buddhi sattva, that is pristine, immaculate, virgin state of chitta, not tainted by any gravity, not tainted by any object. So untouched by object is the transparency of buddhi sattva, and samyama in it would be only catching reflection of Purusha, which you just now heard. Otherwise, the chitta is catching reflection of subjective entity as well as objective world. And therefore, we have experiences by the aprukti that I know this, I know that, I am knower of this, I am knower of that. That is called pratyaya. So that jnanam, the pratyaya, is because the bodhisattva contains both a reflection of Purusha and reflection of object. And in the double reflection theory, as you heard, the object is container of object, and that is reflected into Purusha, and then there is a re-reflection of it into Buddhi, and that's why Ekameva Darshanam, Chatireva Darshanam, which is the Panchashika Sutra. So, Swartha Samyama would be giving Purusha Jnana. One might construe the other way around, that for Purusha Jnanam, the locus of Samyama should be Purusha. It is quite obvious that if you want to know Atma Tattva, the Atma Tattva should be targeted. Atma Tattva should be the locus of Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi. And that is being ruled out, and it is clearly said that Swartha Samyama would give Purusha Jnanam. And how is this Swartha? This Swartha is without, the Swa-artha is Buddhi Sattva. It is without any worldly reflection, worldly impact, worldly gravity, worldly influence, or vasanatmak influence. So it would be untouched by the whole prapanchik things, the worldly things, and therefore it would be like a transparent lake, absolutely crystal clear lake, reflecting the moon in it or reflecting the sun in it. Then, in that still and steady and transparent lake, there is no distortion of the reflected entity. So the chitta has to become pure and chitta has to become steady. Then it is like still and steady, transparent lake which gives ditto reflection without any refraction or distortion or contortion. And that is the Bodhisattva. And that is the Swartha. The Swartha should not be mistaken to the word that we have in vernacular popular language usage. The Swa-artha. The chitta in its pure pristine state is Swa-artha. And that is why it is Swartha. And then there the Purusha, Jnanam would be coming up in the chitta, because the lake being still and transparent, absolutely pure. Pure because untouched by objects, pure because untouched by vasanas, and therefore it is pure. So pure, untouched by rajatama gunas, and therefore it's called Bodhisattva. And that's why sattvapuruṣayoratyantāsaṃkīrṇayoḥ, is the commencement of the sutra. So that would give the Purusha Jnanam, which is supreme siddhi, which is sattvapuruṣayoratyantāsaṃkīrṇayoḥ or vivekakhyati, etc. Okay.
Okay, so let's begin with the Bhashya. So Vyasa says, Buddhisattvam prakhyāshīlam samāna sattvopanibandhane rajastamasi vashīkritya sattvapuruṣayoratyantāsaṃkīrṇayoḥ parinatam. So Buddhisattvam prakhyāshīlam. So the sattva guna is said to be of the nature of prakasha, illumination, knowledge, which when transformed or which becomes the buddhi, that is the Bodhisattvam, which is prakhyāshīlam, of the nature of illumination, knowledge. Samana sattvopanibandhane rajastamasi. So along with that sattva, it is referring to raja and the tama gunas, which is always together with it. So samana sattvopanibandhane. That means it is often described as avinabhavatvam, which means they are always together. So samanam, ekarupam, sattvopanibandhanam, avinabhavitvam, yayoho te. So that is what it refers to. To be very technical, it is sattve, which means sattayam, upanibandhanam, karanam hetuhu iti sattvopanibandhanam. So essentially, there the raja and tama that are always present along with the sattva. So samana sattvopanibandhane rajastamasi vashīkritya. So having taken those two under control or having suppressed them. So the sattva is active and shining. The raja and tama, which are always present along with it, their activity, potentiality has been suppressed. In that condition, sattvapuruṣa anyatā pratyayena parinatam. So that buddhi, which is prakhyāshīlam, once the raja and the tama have been suppressed and taken care of and dealt with, then sattvapuruṣa anyatā pratyayena parinatam. Then the cognitive imprint on it, the jnanam on it, the pratyaya in the chitta is that of sattvapuruṣa anyatā. So how the sattva, the bodhisattva, the pure sattva and the purusha, they are entirely different. That is the jnanam that emerges. So sattvapuruṣa anyatā pratyayena parinatam. It has changed, transformed to hold that particular jnanam. Continuing. Tasmācca sattvat parināminah. So tasmācca sattvat parināminah. Against that, or different from that changing or changed Bodhisattva, Atyanta Vidharma, of a completely different nature, of a completely different dharma. So its very nature is very different. Atyanta Vidharma, Vishuddhaha, Anyaha, completely pure, completely different, of a completely different nature. Chitimatra Rupaha Purushaha. So the Purusha is completely different even from that condition of the Chitta that was just described. The Purusha is always pure, always Vishuddha. There is no taint even of Sattva or Raja or Tama or anything. Chitimatra Rupaha. It is a nature of pure sentience, pure consciousness, so to speak. That is what Purusha is. Tayoho Atyanta Asankirnayoḥ pratyayāviśeṣah bhogaḥ puruṣasya darshita viṣayatvat. So now this is something that we already looked at when discussing the sutra. So with respect to these two, which are completely different, there is nothing between them to be confused or mixed. The pratyayāviśeṣa, when it arrives in a condition where there is the same pratyaya, same jnanam, which means there is some vritti in the chitta, which through the process of the quote-unquote reflection of the Purusha becomes the jnanam, paurusheya bodha, that condition is the bhogaḥ of the Purusha. The Purusha is undergoing experience, enjoyment, sorrow, so on. It is undergoing bhoga. Why? Darshita viṣayatvat. Because Vishayas are being presented to it, to the Purusha, by the Chitta. So the conception, as discussed in the first chapter, is Chitta undergoes transformation. So in its form, so to speak, form or shape, whenever there is any cognition or vritti that takes place, and that is presented to the Chitta, who then echoes it, and that is how the knowledge or understanding happens. So it is known as Darshita Vishaya. It has been presented to it. So because of that, it is a bhoga, it is an experience, and then experience of the nature of joy, sorrow, or whatever. So it is bhogaḥ puruṣasya darshita viṣayatvat. Sabhoga pratyayah sattvasya parārthatvāt drishyah. So now this particular cognitive imprint, which has been labeled as bhoga, or which has been called bhoga, it is a drishya. It is the thing that is seen, thing that is cognized. And it is parārtha. So parārthatvāt drishyah. It is known as seen or cognized because that shape and form or the transformation of the chitta where it presents the Vishayas, it is for the purpose of something else. The chitta is not undergoing transformation for itself. All the transformation of chitta, prakriti, etc. is for the purpose of the Purusha, and it is drishya. It is to be called as drishya, the seen entity. It is an entity of the category of being seen. So it is not the cognizer, it is not the subject, it is the cognized. It is the object. Yastu tasmad vishishtah chitimatra rupaha anyaha paurusheya pratyayah tatra sanyamat purusha vishaya prajñā jayate. On the other hand, there is another pratyaya, another imprint, cognitive imprint on the chitta, which is different from it, tasmad vishishtah. So different from the bhoga pratyaya that was just discussed. Of what nature is this? Chitimatra rupaha. It is of the nature of sentience alone, consciousness alone, which we have been referring to as pratibhamba or reflection. That is that aspect of the transformation of the chitta whereby the touch of the Purusha, quote unquote touch, or the influence of the Purusha brings in the consciousness or sentience onto the chitta. So that aspect of the cognitive imprint on the chitta, that is a different pratyaya, which is paurusheya, arising out of the Purusha. So it is a paurusheya pratyaya. With this part, which is very different from the bhoga pratyaya. This is not, the paurusheya pratyaya is not arising from the chitta undergoing transformations and cognition for the purpose of the Purusha. Those are the parārtha bhoga pratyaya. Here, this is the chitta getting influenced, getting the influence from the Purusha of the nature of chittimatra, the nature of sentience or consciousness. And that particular imprint is paurusheya, and that is why it is not parārtha. Chitta is not doing that for the purpose of Purusha. It is happening on it due to the influence of the Purusha. So the paurusheya pratyaya. So now tatra sayamat. So if the sayam is done on that aspect of the chitta, what happens? Purusha vishaya prajñā jayate. Now the prajñā that arises from it, the great knowledge, the pure cognitive imprint that will arise in the chitta from that sayama is a Purusha vishaya prajñā. It is a prajñā whose vishaya, whose topic, so to speak, whose nature is that of the Purusha. So Purusha vishaya prajñā jayate, that emerges. Further Vyasa clarifies, nacha Purusha pratyayena buddhi sattvatmana Purushaha drishyate. So he clarifies. So this Purusha vishaya prajñā or the paurusheya pratyaya, which was mentioned earlier, by that the buddhi sattvatmana, by the buddhi sattva, the Purusha itself is not seen. Okay, it is not as though the Sayama gives a glimpse of the actual Purusha. That cannot happen because the Yato Vacho Nivartante, which we just discussed. Essentially, it is nicely put in another text where it says, Chittya jadaha prakashyate na jadena chitihi. Purusha pratyayastu achidatma katham chidatmanam prakashayet. So the chitta or the buddhi is a jada entity. It is a material entity which is to be illuminated by something else, by the seer, by the Purusha. So it is the seer that can illumine the scene. Chittya jadaha prakashat. So the chiti, which is the Purusha, can illumine the material, the scene. So chittya jadaha prakashyate na jadena chitihi. Some material entity like a chitta or buddhi, etc., cannot illumine the seer, cannot illumine the chiti shakti, cannot illumine the chitihi. So chittya jadaha prakashyate na jadena chitihi. Purusha pratyayah tu achidatma katham chidatmanam prakashayet. So even the Purusha pratyaya that we are talking about, the imprint of the Purusha, the influence of the Purusha on the Chitta, that is still achit. It is still of the nature, it is a sort of a material entity, it is something within the Chitta. How can that illumine the Purusha itself, which is a Chidatma? The Purusha pratyayastu achidatma katham chidatmanam prakashayet. So similarly, Vyasa is saying, Nacha Purusha pratyayena buddhi sattvatmana Purusho drishyate. The Purusha itself is not seen. Purusha eva tam pratyayam svatmavalambanam pashyati. So what happens is, just like Purusha is experiencing the various pratyayas during the normal activity of the chitta, which is the vritti sarupam itaratra, in this case, the Purusha itself will accept that pratyaya, will accept that imprint, which is the paurusheya pratyaya, svatmavalambanam pashyati. So just like it cognizes any other cognitive imprint, here it will cognize its own pure imprint. Okay, so the same bodha will happen not on some other material entity like a flower or a cow, etc. Its own imprint will be cognized by it. So Purusha eva tam pratyayam svatmavalambanam pashyati. So again, elsewhere it is sort of nicely described, where it is said, the darpanavat mukhalambanam, just like one sees one's own face in the mirror. Similarly, here the Purusha is sort of cognizing its own imprint. So it is darpanavat mukhalambanam. So now that is what is happening in this case. So Purusha himself directly can never be seen by the chitta. So Purusha eva tam pratyam svatmavalambanam pashyati. Then Vyasa quotes Tata yuktam, the famous wonderful quote from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So in the Brihadaranyaka it is said, and Vyasa quotes Tata yuktam Vijñātāramare kena vijaniyat. The Vijñāta himself, the one who is the knower, by whom can he be known? So essentially the knower category is a different category from the known category. And how can something know the knower? So that is a wonderful, very famous line from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and here Vyasa says, Vijñātāramare kena vijaniyat. So even after all this Sayyama, the Purusha Jnanam is after all, the Purusha Vishaya Prajna that arises, it is arising from the Sayyama on the influence of the Purusha on the Chitta and not directly on the Chitta itself. So that is an important fine point that one needs to understand, and also appreciate how the Sutra and the Bhashya, they are so careful to clearly set up the framework and the subject so that the boundaries are maintained and a proper consistent structure is conveyed. So that is the wonderful Sutra 3.35 and its Bhashya.
So the unique realm of spiritual experience or spiritual knowledge is being described here, because this is the topic of Purusha Jnanam. Now, what is this Purusha Jnanam? See, just as in perception and cognition, when the rose is at sight, we say, I know the rose. And similarly, we make expressions for I know the rose, I know the sun, I know the moon, I know the mountain, I know the ocean, I know the tree, I know the fruit. So the objective knowledge is of that nature. Now, it should not be misconstrued that similarly it is a realm of spiritual knowledge that one says, I know the self. I know myself. I know the self. It is not the same way. So this is that mysticism which comes in the realm of spiritual process is being deciphered by Vyasa in his commentary, in which you heard just now. As I said just now, that sattva, buddhi sattva is almost identical to Purusha. And therefore, the transparent chitta and steady chitta is important. And that's why the sadhaka will understand why yogic processes are for making the chitta pure, for it to become transparent, and for chitta to become still, steady, so that the reflection that would fall of Purusha would be ditto emulation of the reflected entity, which is Purusha. Otherwise, in clean water, we also get reflections. But if the surface of the water is ruffled, then we get contortions and distortions. So therefore, we want the lake to be pure, clean, transparent in pure water, with pure water, and also steady. So the buddhi sattva is that condition. Now, in our case, we do have buddhi sattva. It is not called buddhi sattva. because it has lots of distractions, it has lots of rufflings, it has lots of waves, it has lots of paint, colors, etc. by Rajatama Gunas. So, Vyasa taking care of the ontology, he says you cannot have pure sattva, 100% sattva condition. There is always a touch of Rajatama Gunas. Even if it is buddhi sattva, referred to as buddhi sattva, it doesn't mean that it is sattva guna 100% buddhi. It is Rajatama Gunas too. They avinabhavena exist. They always coexist. But it is the proportion that matters. Preponderance of sattva guna means it is sattvic. As is the case of in entire cosmological process, preponderance of rajoguna is rajoguna. Preponderance of tamoguna is tamoguna. Is referred to or designated as tamoguna, designated as rajoguna, designated as sattva-guna. So Vyasa makes it clear by that predication, avinabhavena. But then there is preponderance of sattva, whereby the chitta can become transparent and chitta can become still. And therefore the Purusha would be reflected into it. And he also takes care to make it clear that the Purusha Jnanam is not of the nature of I know Purusha, like it happens, I know the rose, I know the mango, I know the ocean, I know the mountain. It is not similar case here. This is the subjectivistic realm, and therefore he makes that clear. And he also brings that aspect of mirror. Now, mirror has a unique characteristic. The mirror will never cease to reflect. Mirror will always have some reflection or the other. Even if you apply a thick coat of tar on the mirror, mirror is going to reflect the tar. If you wrap the mirror in a black paper so that no light would enter, it will reflect that paper. It will reflect the wrapper. So mirror doesn't cease to reflect. So our buddhi tattva also doesn't cease to reflect. It either reflects worldly objects or vasanic objects or real objects or virtual objects. It goes on reflecting something or the other. But then if all these objects are set aside by yogic process, that no object is coming in front of the mirror, no vasanic object is coming in front of the mirror, no objective object is coming in front of the mirror, then what will it reflect? And that is why the concept of chitta shuddhi and the yogic process of abhyasa vairagya, so that these objects, either mental or actual, will not reflect in the mirror. Then what will reflect? Only Purusha Tattva will reflect. And therefore that reflection is known, and therefore in the epistemology of mysticism, they discuss about Anvaya Jnana and Vyatireka Jnanam. So that's an interesting topic in epistemology. Even Patanjali has used the word Purusha Jnanam here, and elsewhere he has used Purusha Khyati. So at some stage, one has to go into inquiry why Purusha Jnana and Purusha Khyati are two terms. What is Purusha Jnanam and what is Purusha Khyati? Just as in epistemology, we have something which is called as Anvaya Jnana, Vyatireka Jnanam. I will give a simple example that when you infer that the person so and so is not at home. Now, will you see the absence of the person? Is it an object? You infer, because he is not at home, you say he is not at home. Or sometimes he leaves a mark. that when he is at home, there is always a mark at the door that he is in the house. And there is always absence of that mark when he is not in the house. So, a person like Chaitra, if you see that his footwear is outside his door, then you infer that Chaitra is inside. But the footwear which is always outside the door is not outside the door, is absent there, that then you know that he has walked away with the chappals, footwear, he has gone out. That is called Vyatireka Jnanam. Mark being absent, when you infer, and it is quite a confirmation that the person is not there, it is called Vyatireka Jnanam. And when you hunt the whole house and don't find him, then you say he is not at home. So that's called Anvaya Jnana and Vyatireka Jnana. Patanjali has also used Purusha Jnanam and Purusha Khyati. So this Purusha Jnanam is in a way a kind of Vyatireka Jnanam, because Purusha is not cited. As you heard the quotation, Vijñātāram arekena vijanayat, a Brihad Upanishad. How can you know the knower? And there is similarly in subjectivistic mysticism, all this knowledge is of that nature. A spiritually realized person, where he doesn't claim that I know the Purusha, I know the Atma Tattva, I have seen the Atma Tattva. It is not that way. And Vyasa has made it clear here, because it is not possible, as you heard Taittiriya Upanishad and Brihad Upanishad quotations, it is similarly the case. And therefore, Buddhi Sattva is only resort for this spiritual enlightenment. And that enlightenment is had in Buddhi Sattva. It is not direct vision of Purusha as one might infer naively, that you see the rose and you say, this is the rose, and I know the rose. This is the pot and therefore I know the pot. This is sun and therefore I know the sun. It is not that way in the mysticism of subjectivism. And that also has been made pretty clear in Vyasa's comment. Basically, the bhoga aspect should be dwindling, and that's why the yogic process always does that. The objects are kept at bay, physical and real objects are kept at bay, so also the vasanic objects are kept at bay, and that's how the Buddhi Sattva, the Chitta becomes pure, transparent, immaculate, and then it can only get the reflection of Purusha and nothing else. And that is the kind of Purusha Jnanam that is mentioned in the Sutra. Parārthatvātsvārthasaṃyamātpuruṣa Jnanam. The Buddhi Sattva is parārthatva, it has parārthatva. And in that Swartha Samyama, there is, when it's only for Purusha, not meant for any real object, virtual object, or psychic object, vasanic object, then it becomes Swartha. It is for only Purusha. So Purusha only will be the content of Chitta, and there will be no other content in the Chitta. That is the Samadhi process. That's why Vritti Nirodha is postulated in yoga. So that's how a wonderful piece of enlightenment for we commoners also, that Purusha Jnanam is not like knowledge of our objective world, mountain, river, ocean, sea, rose, pot, person. We don't get Purusha Jnanam that way. It is not a condition, I have seen the Purusha. It is not condition, I have seen the Atma. I am seeing the Atma, I have seen the Atma, I have saw the Atma. It doesn't happen. Why? Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasataha. And then, Vijñātāram kena vijanayat, how we know the knower itself. So this is a kind of Vyatireka Jnanam of Purusha, reflection of it ditto reflection of it is caught in pure chitta, which is buddhi sattva. So that's the samyama which gives purusha jnanam. Okay.
Yes. So with this, let's end our session for today. Let's recite the shlokas on Guruji. And stop. वैज्ञानिकं प्रवक्तृत्व आसनेषु कलाविदं योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञं वन्देऽहं सुन्दरं गुरुम् योगवृक्षो हि लोकेऽस्मिन् यत्प्रेरणेन वर्धितः योगाचार्यगुरो तुभ्यं सुन्दराय नमो नमः. Thank you.
Namaskar, all of you.